First thing we've got to do, once the vehicle's parked on level, stable surface, as you can see here, is we've got to start the engine and put the PDO into gear. Alright, start the engine. This being a manual transmission, put my foot on the clutch, gauge the PDO, foot right off the clutch. See it's come up there on the dash that it's on, and we'll just idle up the vehicle and give it a few revs so that the tray works a bit quicker. With the PDO engaged, we'll walk around to the left hand side of the vehicle. The hydraulic spool valve is mounted on the left hand side behind the rear wheels. You'll see this particular vehicle's actually got an auxiliary hydraulic circuit. Most of them have only got 3 levers, slide in, out, up and down in the winch. Some have got 5, with the other 2 being the legs, or if they've got a second car underlift, they operate that. This one's actually got a air operated dog clutch, which is pretty standard as well. And this is the radio remote unit. The tray has a lockout device to stop it from being lifted until it is slid back. I'll just slide it forward so you can see it. So in its slid forward position, the tilt lever cannot be worked because it's in that lockout bar. The reason that that lockout bar is there is that when the tray slides forward to its first position, it slides into this lockout device. This ties it down to the truck chassis, and obviously it would do a lot of damage if the tray was to be lifted while it's in that. So I'll just slide it back again. Right, initially to slide the tray back to get it off for your first load, just lift the first lever or use the button on the remote. So you'll see that this lever here is up. Just put it back into neutral. Slide the tray back a little bit, then you can lift it up, which is the second lever. You can see it lifts up as well. Lift the tray up a little bit. And then keep sliding it back until it slides into the ground. Right, the tray is at the full extent of its travel there. You just lift it up until it touches the ground, and then if it's a spring truck, like this one is, especially if it's got a load on, just give it a little bit more just to jam the tray on the ground pretty well. Otherwise, when you unload something, the tray might spring up and hit the item that you've just slid off. With the winch rope connected to your load, you can now start winching the load on. So using the radio remote or the levers, press the winch in. You'll see it's not working, and that's because the dog clutch is still released. Go and flick the dog clutch back in again. You'll see that it doesn't want to go in, so I'm going to hold some pressure on the switch here and operate the winch. You see it snapped into gear there, and now the winch will operate. So when you're winching, keep yourself right out of the way of the winch cable. So I'm going to go and stand back here. If it was to snap, there's no way that it could swing round and hit me. And now we're going to start winching, and the thing to remember is don't get in the way of the load. If anything was to happen, you want to make sure that whatever you're winching on there can't roll off and run you over. Right, here we are winching the load on, as you can see, out of the way of the winch cable, and this forklift slowly moving up the tray. I'll winch the forklift up until it's in position. Normally you would winch a load on pretty much as far up as you can go. The further up the tray you get it, the less counterweight you've got behind the back wheels. So now I'm going to secure the load. I'm not going to include securing the load in this video. That's something that you'll have to work on your own company procedures. Once your load is secured, and secured front and rear, see I've got this machine chained on front and rear, and this is no indication on how you should chain a vehicle or anything on the road. That's something your company will have to advise you on. Then we slacken the winch cable off just a little bit so that there's no load on the winch at all. Now with the load secured, now we can start to put the tray back on the truck. I'm going to do this with the radio remote just so that you can see what happens. Right, obviously when you've got a lot of weight behind the back wheels, and I'll just drop the tray down a little bit so you can see, it's going to try and if you try lifting it, this is when the tray's in its weakest position, the front wheels of the truck will start coming off the ground. So I'll just lift it down a little bit. You can see the back tyres are getting fairly fat and the front of the truck is lifting. Right, I'll drop it back down again. So what we've got to do is we've got to slide the tray on before we lift it up. So slide the tray on until the weight is over the back wheels. The weight in this case is this forklift. So you can see as it's sliding back on, there's a lot of weight on those back tyres. Front tyres are alright. Sometimes you may have to lift the tray up a little bit to keep the front wheels on the ground. So you slide the tray back on. When the weight is over the back of the truck as it is now, you don't want to slide it right up, otherwise it will run into the lockdown. Then you lift it back down again. To slide the tray back with the load on, first of all we'll slide it back 300 or 400 millimetres so that it's out of its lockdowns and the lockout device is disengaged. Once it's gone back a little way and you can see the weight still over the truck at the back here, then we'll lift the tray up. If you haven't got legs, lift it right up until the run under bar hits the ground. Otherwise, if you've got a light load on it, probably won't worry you too much. Run under bar has just hit the ground there. Now we'll keep sliding the tray out until it hits the ground as well. So once the run under bars hit that ground, we'll just lift it up just a little bit more, just to take the weight off the springs, and there we have it. To get your load back off again, walk up, we'll just put a little bit of tension back onto that winch cable, and then we can release all the load restraints. I'll just go and do this and I'll start the video again. With the load restraints removed, we can then winch off our load. With the load off the truck, now we'll just have to return the winch cable back up to the winch, which some blokes leave it down the back on chains. They're happy to, but it's always a good idea to leave a little bit of pressure on that winch cable as you're spooling it on, just so that it spools on nice and neatly. When winching in, you must be very careful not to winch the eye all the way into the winch, otherwise it will hit this cable tensioner and it will damage it severely. So always leave a little bit of a tail hanging out when you're winching in, and be very careful when you're winching a load on that the chains are short enough that they're not going to pull into the winch. You must have the tray right down for the last probably 300 or 400 mil of travel, otherwise you stand a chance of sliding the tray over the top of the lockdowns and not in them. If that happens, you'll have to slide the tray back. Once it's back past its lockout, then let it down, then slide it forward into its lockdown. There are a couple of grease points on the winch, one here, one there, that only need a pump or two of grease every now and again. And there is also another grease nipple right under the winch cable there that only needs a few pumps every time the winch cable is replaced, so not very often at all. There are 6 grease nipples on the scissor, 2 at the very top, 2 in the middle and 2 at the bottom. This is the scissor in the middle of the tray. Never get under the tray with the engine running, and always make sure the tray is slid right back and the engine is off. If somebody was to touch the radio remote or the hydraulic controls, you pull the tray down and crush you. There are 2 grease nipples on the rear pivots as well, right underneath, as you can see.